Well, I've had to do this video from home because there was a bit of a disaster with my camera. But to kick it off with, a few months ago, our four-wheel drive club did a trip up Makawai Station, which was right up the top of Totara Valley, the very end of the road. And as we're heading off on our journey, there's a sign there saying Trains Hut. So I stored it away, and a couple of weeks later after our trip I jumped on the map and had a look and found the Trains Hut, all dock land, and was hunting in the area. So I grabbed some gear and thought I'll shoot up there and see if I can pick up a fellow. I had no plans of going into trains as such, because it's 15k walk in. So I got there really early, and it was just starting to drizzle, and threw some gear on. Got about 100 metres and there was a massive tree had slipped down across the track. So I had a look down the bottom side, and it was a bit too dangerous down towards the river, so go up around the top side, all the root system, and it was just absolute clag up to my knees, just papa clay bog. So struggled through that and got to the other side, and something went awry with my sling, and my rifle did a dive into the mud and filled the barrel up with dirt. So I got to find a few little sticks and feed that through with branches and give that a clean out, get my sling sorted and carried on. And then it absolutely started to heave down. Geez. About 20 minutes later the sun came out, and I went, wow, it was alright, but virtually not a breath of wind. It was pretty cool. So first part, you're walking on farm road, really hard going in the wet. Your feet are just sucking into the mud. It's like ankle deep. There's no way around it. Just have to plough straight through it. You're picking up, I don't know, 500 grams worth of mud every time you lift your foot, so it's pretty hard going. And then you get to a section where it's back to farmland and there's no hunting, and then you carry on through that, and then you're back to hunting again. Straight away there was a pile of goats in there, and being a little tight valley, I actually didn't want to drop a goat because I was just going to reverb up the valley, and just, all the deer are going to know someone's around. So I carried on along the track, and the track is really flat. It's not very wide at times, maybe half a metre wide at times, and just drops straight off down to the river. And in the wet, it's actually, you just think you got to thinking to yourself about how dangerous it is, and be careful. And after about half an hour I thought, this is so easy going, I'll put my head down and go for it, and just pile into trains and have a look around. So just as I decided to take off, the weather packed in again. It just absolutely poured down. Track's getting slippier, and I'm thinking, oh shit, and then the sun comes out, and 20 minutes later it pours, and then the sun comes out, and did it all day long. And I got a fair way in, and you get to these get to this bit of a track that's absolutely blown out, so it's all slip, so you got to climb down and then climb back up maybe couple of metres, 2.5 metres. You could very carefully go down a little bit further and climb up some root systems, but there's a good chance of you falling off and going straight to the bottom, which is like 20, 30 metres deep. So I negotiated that, and then there's another massive slip, old slip that had been right across the track. So you're sort of looking at the river down below you, and get across that, pile on again, and I was about 3/4 of the way into Trains, and just down beside my foot was like a hole in the ground, like a tree had been pulled out, root system and all, and I didn't click for a minute or two, and then I looked up and there was another one, and I thought, shit, that's pigs, pigs have, that's pig rooting. And I got round the corner and the whole track was just absolute bombed. I've never seen anything so dug up, and it was so fresh. You couldn't walk across it other than stand in the holes where they'd been digging. It was so bad, and I was sort of just going, wow, and I got round the corner, and bug me days, there must have been like 20 pigs, and 20 pigs was 20 too many. It was probably an understatement of how many pigs were actually in there. So I thought they needed thinning out, so I cut loose, and they're not huge pigs, they're small. I didn't even raise my gun up to my eye, I just pulled the trigger. I dropped 5 pigs, and left them there because I knew Trains wasn't that far away. All the rest had scarpered, and got round the corner, got to Trains, had a look around, and found it was really strange actually. I found a guy had taken all his gear and all his camping gear, cooking pots, bags, and down behind the hut there was a washing line with clothes on the line, and there were some more bags down there stored with a bit of food. All his sleeping bag, everything was in the hut. It was so I had a look in the visitor's book, and it had been there, everything had been there from what people had said for a good couple of months. So I was starting to get a bit concerned about, it's not really normal for people to drag gear in that far, the good gear too, and leave it unless they'd had an accident and, disappeared. I mean, who would know? So I knew there was a bit of a flat up the top of Trains, so I took off. It's a couple of 300 metre climb, so I just raced the hill, got up to the flat, had a quick look around. Whole pile of goats up there, didn't worry about them. Started to heave again, so I just ran the track back down. Got back to the hut, checked the time, and thought, if time I grab some meat off these pigs and get loaded up and get back, if I get back to the start of the track, to the farm track at 6 o'clock on the dark, then it's probably another 2 hours walking the road and out. And I thought, if I can do that, I'll feel safe. So I ran back to the pigs and just started carving legs off, and didn't worry about bones, just boned off as much meat, filled my pack up. Got a bit carried away. I was unbelievable. Went to pick my pack up and throw it on, and went, bloody hell, what the hell have I done here? This is just crazy. So ended up, had to waste a little bit of meat, but at least it was thinning a few pigs out. And I usually train with 25 kg, and I knew I was around that somewhere, so threw that on and headed off, and it was really dangerous. Had to stay on the track, trying to keep your balance, because if I fell, you weren't coming back. You're not climbing back up that bank, in torrential rain. The river was flooded. There's a part there where there's a waterfall comes down the track, straight onto the track, and you've got to walk around and under the wee waterfall. The rocks are slippery as, so Short story, got to where I wanted to be on dark, but I was half an hour later than I wanted to be, and then started walking on this clag road, and after about an hour I felt like I'd blown 2 hernias. My back was giving me grief, and I lay down and looked at my GPS and went, okay, it's a couple of K, do another 500 metres. So up I get and carry on, and I just fell over and had a look at my GPS. Only gone 70 metres. I wanted to cry, so talked myself into right, let's do 100 metres. So I get up again and carried on, and everything was screaming, and fell over and had a look, and I'd made 50 metres. And this went on, and I pulled my pack off and I threw some more meat away. And it was getting pretty late. It was getting really, really late now. And I came up to this corner and I could hear this plop, 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 plop coming towards me, and I just stood there trying to work out what the hell was going on. And it was right on a corner, and all of a sudden this big longhorn steer comes screaming round the corner, and I just yelled at it and ripped my rifle off my back. Had no ammo, and I go, that's a fat lot of use. And he skidded, and we must have been like 1.5 meters away from me. And I was looking at it, and it was looking at me, and its breath was coming out its nose like a fog, and it just had this really guilty look in its eyes. It was really funny, and it guiltily looked to the left, and I went, oh, you just want to go past, sort of thing. So I took 2 paces to the right, and it would plop, 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 and carried on. I said, oh, thank God for that. My heart was just sort of jumping out of my bloody skin. So that actually gave me a bit of an adrenaline pump, and took off, and I got some good distance before I fell over and cried again. And eventually I got back to the truck. It was well and truly late now. In fact, it was so late that the wife was getting pretty worried, and she had been onto the phone ringing a few mates around, and they sort of reassured her that don't jump the gun just yet, he'll be fine, give him a few more hours yet. And they all knew where I was. So I threw everything into the truck, and my boots were just big clumps of bog. My toes, my feet were just absolutely aching. I ended up with black toenails, and about 4 black toenails. Yeah, this wasn't a good deal. The boots were just a fraction tight. And then headed off from the top of Makawai station back down the Waitotara, and my energy levels and the tiredness, it just hit me, and before I knew it, I'd all but fallen asleep in the truck, and it was just like bang, snap, and I'm awake again, and it's just inches away from throwing the truck and myself into this big ditch. So I pulled over and hopped out and had a bit of a walk around, and just gave myself a bit of a bash around, and slapped my legs and jumped in, and then drove off a bit further, and then stopped and hopped out and had a bit of a walk around in the cold air. It was bloody absolutely freezing, and I wasn't feeling too bad. And then I managed to get to the main road and tried phoning home, and nothing was happening there. So once I hit the main road, the main highway back to Wanganui, I was fine. I was bright as a button again, and got about another 20 minutes and then managed to get some cell. Phoned home and yeah, I wasn't feeling flash. I was absolutely nailed, and just said to the wife, I'll give you a ring when I'm about half an hour out, you know, you chuck the bath on. And so managed to get home. I could hardly stand up. I was so sore that I was doubled over and just crawled inside, crawled upstairs and jumped in the bath and lay there for a couple of hours. You know, it wasn't a good event. It was 15k in and 15k out, plus up to the top and back, so it was 32 kilometre trip, and the last 15k I weighed my pack, had 32 kilos of meat in it. I can laugh about it now, but I assure you that was not fun. So I would definitely go back in there again, but I wouldn't recommend people doing it as a day trip and shooting anything that was, especially in the dry. It might be alright in the dry, in and out in a day in the dry, you know, a good hard track and not carrying as much gear, but a weekend trip in there, take a kid, take the wife, take whatever. It's an absolute awesome walk on the track. You do have to be careful with your footing though, because like I say, if you do slip, then you're going to be in a bit of shit trying to get back up. And the hut's really tidy. Yeah, so I took a few photos when I was in there, and because I was so knackered when I got out, I left everything in my bag, just left the boots in the truck, and unfortunately things were so soggy, and with a bit of juice from the meat and whatever, or water, just flooded my camera. I had no real video or footage left of the trip, so I've had to do a bit of a cheat and borrow a couple of photos off the net to put up of Trains Hut, but really good spot. I think if you're a bow hunter and you want to shoot goats or you want to shoot an animal, hundreds of goats for buddy. I got up to a goat about a metre away. Yeah, actually on the way back out, I did stop and have a bit of a blast with the rest of my ammo. I probably nailed about 20 goats, just having a bit of a clean up because there's so many goats. I think at one point I had 2 lots of 5 or 6 goats running down the track in front of me, and then I had this big fat ginger bugger running on the track, and then he'd jump into the bushes and then he'd come back out and run on the track. Big fat guts he was, but I didn't have any ammo left, so yeah. So yeah, Waitotara Trains Trains Hut, get a dock permit, jump online, get a permit for the whole of the North Island. That's usually what I do. Permit only lasts you 4 months for anywhere you go, so it's easy as, do the right thing. There's lots of areas where you can bail off the track and just head for the hills, but as with hunting, be ultra careful, and if you're going to do that, I'd definitely go with a mate, otherwise stick to the track. So catch you later.